everyone. This is Rejoice and at You Matter Consultant podcast today. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Alberto, author of The Management of Innovation. I would love for him to introduce himself and then we'll dive right into the questions. So, Albert, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to chat with you. My name is Alberto Galasso. I'm a professor of strategic management at the Rotman School of Management. It's the business school of the University of Toronto in Canada. I teach courses related to innovation and technology strategy. I am an economist in terms of research. I do research that try to understand what drives innovation activity in firms, in industries and countries, and how firms should use intellectual property and other strategies to manage their technologies.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Garcel. Thank you for joining us today. To start with, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to write The Management of Innovation?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I teach in the MBA and the undergraduate courses of the University of Toronto, courses related to technology strategy. So it's been several years that I kind of put together material that I was using in these classes, and eventually I thought to create a book that would help explaining more to a more general audience or what are the topics that we usually study in business schools that are related to innovation and management of technology.
Nice. Awesome. I remember those days when I took business management or economics classes, and the focus around managing and creating technology is actually a big buzzword right now. Can you briefly explain what technology capital means and what it's important for organizations today?
Yeah, so technology capital is, I took it as a subtitle in the book because it's a term that is used a lot by economists, but is not very much used outside, probably academia. But it's an interesting point that wording makes is usually when we think about firms and we think about what are their assets and their capital, you think about usually two big things. You think about your labor force, your employees, your talent, and then you think about all these tangible things that you have, like your factories, your plants, your equipment, your machinery, your computers, and so on. And especially in the past 30 years, economists have pointed out that there is more. If you think about really what drives the success of your company, there is also all the knowledge that you have, all these things that are not really tangible, but are related to the technological development and the innovation and the science that you do in your company. So in a sense, you may think about those as all the intangible assets that can be crucial for a firm to grow and to do well in their industry. In the book, I actually explain that if you look at the past 30 years, like if you look at the 80s, for example, the idea of intellectual property, for example, that is like the patents and the and this kind of tools that you use to protect these intangible technologies was typically seen as something important for lawyers and for
Mm.
big companies, but not really crucial for managers to think every day about how their company can be better than the competitors. But then things changed, and there was an interview that was done to Bill Gates about 20 years ago, in which Bill Gates said, we need to start thinking differently about patents and intellectual property. It's not just a problem for the legal department of firm.
Right.
This is really can be the most important driver of profitability of firms. And if you fast forward 20 years, that was really right. Nowadays, estimates are that if you take the biggest companies in the stock market, about 80% of their value is not driven by the capital that you can touch, is not driven by their plants, their equipment, their machinery, is driven by this intellectual capital, this kind of technology capital, patent portfolio, copyrights, and all these intangible assets.
Amazing, amazing. I love you referencing Bill Gates and the idea of making sure companies were paying attention to this. And it actually segs way to our next question, which I know you have been emphasizing the importance of intellectual property in it in innovation. Why do you think many organizations, especially small firms, they tend to overlook the role of IP in their strategy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in a sense, up to 15, 20 years ago, it was mostly seen as a big firm problem because to get particular patents, it was seen as something expensive that take time. And also, if you have a patent, if you're a small firm, even if someone then is copying your technology, you may not have the money to kind of hire a lawyer and
Right.
try to stop, especially if it's a bigger firm, it may take a lot of time and resources to do it. But then things kind of have changed, and there's been a substantial increase in research that shows that it can be super important for small firms to think really seriously about their first IP strategy, this IP strategy at the very beginning of their journey. The way you file the first patent, the type of application that you have, where you file the patent. Do you need an American patent, a European patent, a Korean patent? Those are super important questions, and not to do that seriously may lead to big problems later on. The research shows that firms that do well in terms of filing the first patent, they're way more likely to grow, way more likely to get money from venture capitalists, way more likely to get money from banks, and eventually even to reach more likely to reach the IPO, to be traded in public markets. So going back to your point, on one end is also things have changed. People are realize these days how important these things is. Um, it's especially from the financing perspective, people that want to invest in your company, especially if you're a startup and you don't have a lot because you just started and you may not even have a product, you just have an idea of the problem. Patents and intellectual property may be the only thing that you have, the only thing that people can look at and try to see as something that they can assess, something that can potentially also be used as collateral for financing and so on.
Amazing, amazing. Great points. So in the book, I know you highlighted the role of CEOs' attitudes and beliefs in driving innovation. How can leaders foster a culture of risk taking? And taking the example of taking the risks within their organization.
Yeah, so this is a good point. The the idea is that very often people say our company does really well in innovation because of the corporate culture. We have the culture of innovation. That's something very easy to say, but when you ask them, like you try to really understand what they mean, what does it mean to be in an organization where there is a culture of innovation, that's not so easy. And in my book, I actually talk about a very nice contribution by a professor at Harvard Business School called Gary Pisano that
Hmm.
has studied and written a lot about this. And his point is that on one hand, it can be very simple to tell you what an, a culture of innovation look like. For example, you want collaboration, right? You want people to collaborate and exchange idea. You want experimentation, and you want people to have the incentive to try a new thing and not just always work on the same type of projects. You want tolerance for failure. So if someone of your employee tries something new and that's a failure, it should not be over emphasized or over kind of punished because of that. At the same time, though, these things you also have to be very careful because if you push them too much, they can backfire, right? You want collaboration, but you don't want to be in an environment in which nobody's in charge. Otherwise, if nobody has some kind of role of coordinating and leading the team, then it can be also a problem for innovation. You may want experimentation, but also you need to have some kind of rules to when to stop to experiment, because otherwise people just experiment all the time and you never implement anything new, right? and
That's
and
true.
so those kind of things in a sense are easy to say, but to implement in practice are not. To find the right, how much is too much of all these dimensions is really difficult. And that's what make essentially having a culture of innovation not so easy.
Exactly, exactly. So, how would you, I guess, I love hearing the balance that you're describing. So, leaders are not sort of leaning towards the left or right when it comes to innovation. What advice would you give to someone, a leader that is sort of experimenting in this arena to get the right fit?
Yeah, so in there are multiple advices that they can suggest. And one thing that is deep comes out from the literature in economics and in management is that before implementing a strategy, a new strategy that try to push for more innovation, you want to think very carefully about the possible cost and benefits. Okay, the fact that one other company did it doesn't mean that your company should do it. Can
Exactly.
be every company is different, and just copy what other firm did may not be the right thing. For example, one example that I discuss in the book, but I also like to discuss a lot in the class with my students, is should I give big bonuses to employees, to scientists and engineers that develop some new product? Like, it's important to kind of give a bonus, for example, if you are on a patent or not. And some companies were really successful with this. They were really very good at generating a lot of new technology. For example, Motorola is one of the company that in the past was able to do really well with bonuses like that. On the other hand, you have also to understand that this kind of incentive and strategy can backfire. For example, if I give a bonus of someone that develops a new patent, this employee may say, I prefer to work on smaller project where I'm
Right.
sure I'm getting the patent and the bonus than to think about something bigger that may not be possible. Even worse, people may be less likely to discuss idea with their teammates or other employees because they're worried about, okay, what if then they steal my idea and I don't get the bonus. So
Yes.
you create more competition, you create more less collaboration. So it's important to really think through all the cost and benefits when you think about let's change the organization to make it more innovative.
Amazing, amazing. Going along with those recommendations, what advice would you give to a startup or small firm that may not have the resources, like we said, to establish themselves in a major innovation hub like Silicon Valley?
Oh, that's a big question. Um, so and actually something we seen a lot here in Toronto, for example. There are a lot of companies that say, okay, I may not do, I may consider leaving Toronto and going to San Francisco or going to, and I think also across the US, from a lot of places, people then want to move to places like Boston, New York, and San Francisco. Those are major innovation hubs. On the other hand, it's all very important before doing a move like this to understand, um, does it make sense for my company? And not for every company makes sense. In the book, I look at a lot of research that was done that points out what are the factors that are really important in an economic environment, a location for a firm to do well, especially for a technology startup to do well. Things like, are there investors willing to invest in my technology? Are there supplier customers? Are there, enough talent in my research area that I can hire, and so on. And it's really important before kind of taking this big decision to really assess all the advantages of your current location.
Mm,
For example, the fact that you are in a smaller place, that you're not in San Francisco, may give you an advantage in finding some kind of closer interaction with your local university, and then you can collaborate with people there. You can hire maybe um, someone with a PhD when without having to compete with all these big companies that you will have to compete to if you hire someone in San Francisco with a PhD. So there are all sorts of important things to assess. And is important also in this case the fact that you see another company that moves and goes away
Right.
and does well in San Francisco. It doesn't mean that you have to do it. It can be that you can do well in your location.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a great point. Great point. So, in your book as well, we know you stress the importance of prioritizing safety and risk mitigation technologies. Uh, why do you think some companies still overlook this aspect? And what are the potential consequences that they could potentially face?
That's I think it's something kind of new of my book that I talk about this. I've been kind of doing research and reading and teaching courses of on management of technology for many years, and people even in across business school, they have this idea that you always think about the best case scenario. It's important to always think about, okay, what in my product does very well and what is the total market that I will reach and so on. Sometimes when you think about bad case scenario, you think about the product not doing well in the market. Okay, I thought there were so many customers who would be interested in my product and they are not, and you want to think about how to mitigate this product market risk. But essentially, very, very few people have been writing or teaching about there is another big risk that is, especially when you talk about new technology, is that things don't work in the way you were supposed to work, and they create problem in the sense of injuring people, having environmental impact, and so on. So to think about safety is important, and researchers and scientists and engineers need to kind of take those things into account very seriously. There are some industry in which this is, very important. If you do research in pharmaceutical and medical devices, it's part of the overall commercialization strategy to think about safety. But in terms of other industry, is not as a priority,
Right.
and is important to understand. And here, I look at some several articles and research, some of those that I have conducted myself, that not necessarily safety means less innovation. There are companies that actually, because they were able to prioritize safety in their product, they develop a reputation of being very, you know, having the safest product out there, and they did really, really well in the market. Like an example is the producer of cars, Volvo, right? Volvo is
Yes.
known because they're very, very safe cars, and that they were able to kind of do well and get premium in their prices because people were willing to sell this type of stuff. And yeah, the other point that I make in the book is that it's important then to have some kind of strategy or thinking about what if something bad happen, if some kind of accident or problem emerges with my technology, how should that change the technology strategy of the firm? And we provide some, I provide an analysis of the literature that suggests some kind of strategies that can be implemented to deal with these cases.
Amazing, amazing. So, I wonder also if you could give us an example of a company that has successfully integrated risk mitigation technologies into their innovation strategies.
Yeah. So one example that we came out from a research that I've done with collaborators and I discuss in the book is something that happened in the medical device space. There was about 15 years ago, some hospitals in California that had problems with their CT scanners, these big machines that they do kind of an analysis of your body, they do images of your body. Um, there were some kind of problems with these machines, and they have they emitted a lot of radiation. Already, their normal kind of application has very high amount of radiation, but the settings of these machines were wrong, and a lot of people got a lot of radiation. That was really something that not only was bad for these people, but for the company it was a big problem because then there was a lot of media coverage, and it generated a lot of kind of change in perspective toward those type of technology. But if you look at how the companies that were involved reacted, in particular a company like Siemens and the other big producer of this CT scanner technology, there was a kind of a success story. They reacted by being able to redesign these machines in a way that changed the way the image was constructed and reduced a lot the amount of radiation. It didn't slow down innovation. Actually, innovation flourished, and now we have much safer technology, much better technologies. And after they developed this technology, then they went to hospital and say, hey, let's replace the machines with these new machines. So also,
Right?
also sales didn't go down after they went up, because hospital replaced machines that they were thinking they would have replaced 10 years from now. They replaced it earlier because there was something much safer available. So it shows you that sometimes thinking about safety can actually be very positive for the company, and not only for for consumers and society.
Exactly, exactly. And when you tie it to profit, it's no brainer. Why not connect it
Exactly.
into making sure that you're doing the right thing for your consumers, your investors, and also for everyone involved? Makes sense. So, looking ahead, what do you see is the biggest challenges or opportunities for innovation in the next decade?
Well, we're definitely living a very interesting time with all this artificial intelligence and new technologies that are developed in that space, and things are going very, very fast. So it's very, very exciting. There are a lot of very different views about what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. Um, and my view is that it's very hard at this stage to really speculate what companies will do with AI 5, 7, 10 years from now. If you look, for example, at the beginning of the diffusion of the internet, there were so many different perspective out there. Some people were saying, no, no way the people are ever gonna buy plane tickets or books on the internet, right?
Right.
And then on the other hand, also things have changed, but it's not that the economy is completely different from what it was 20 years ago, right? And in particular, also in terms of like employment, it's not that the internet destroyed too many jobs. It's just that it created a lot of jobs that we would not have even imagined 25 years ago. So yeah, for me now, this is a very interesting time, and is very hard to predict. So it's just a time to kind of look and observe what is happening.
Exactly, exactly. Very interesting times that we live in currently.
Yeah.
And we will continue to see the innovation and the opportunities for improvements, adjustments, and relearning. Definitely. So thank you so much. Where can our listeners find your book, The Management of Innovation, if they
Yeah, I
want to?
think the easiest way is to find is Amazon. Is available on Amazon. Is also available in a number of other bookstores in US and Canada. But probably Amazon is the easiest way to find it. So the Management of Innovation by Alberto Palazzo, and you find it.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. Any final words, any advice for our listeners?
No, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and it's great to see that you produce this great content, and as congratulations on this. Is very valuable to see all these experts that you are interviewing, giving some very interesting insights from very different perspectives. So the suggestion for the listeners is like subscribe to the podcast. It's a great podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Alberto. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And we look forward to collaborating more with you in the near future. Thank you
Okay,
so
thank
much.
you. Thank you so much.